As many of you will have seen in my previous video, my 87NA is not doing well. In fact, she may just be in dire straits. She has that engine issue that I'm still trying to figure out. But I am very grateful to be able to share that I do have a replacement. Yes, I pushed the button on another project, so let me introduce you to my 89S2 and a new series we're going to be having here on the channel. Many of you know me by now. I'm a tinkerer, and so I didn't go to the top of the market. Rather, I went down near the bottom and bought a car that is in need of a fair amount of work. While I'm going through my car, if there's anything you want me to be focusing on, please let me know down in the comments section, and I'll absolutely get to that as well. Okay, that's it. Let's get into this walk around. Let me show you the car, and we're going to start at the back of the vehicle and then make our way forward here to the engine bay, where I can tell you there's going to be a few things that are going to horrify some of you. So let's start with the paint and bodywork, and I can tell you all you have to do is get within 2 meters of this car to realize what a shocking paint job this has. I can't really describe it as orange peel. It's more like paint on with a paintbrush and then cover it with a little bit of clear coat or something like that. It really is appalling. It was a quick and dirty or something like that. And there's evidence painting over the stickers. I guess the sad thing is that it's not just located in one area either, it's all over the car, so that's something that we're going to have to contend with. And then there's a little bit of an injury down there. The tail light, or the flicker, we call it an indicator here in South Africa, is broken, and there's evidence of a paint job, this misaligned badging. And then if we come down here, it's very clear that there was a impact on this corner. I mean, just look at all of this body filler and how it is cracking and how thick it is as well. I knew about this before, of course, because I'd seen it, and I went inside to make sure that from a structural perspective it was still in good shape, and I did see that. So they did some work. They even used some black spray paint or something to seal it, so it was very clear from a contrast perspective where they had worked, and I'm pretty okay with that. So now all that's left is to clean this up and actually do a good job, because of course it's not looking very good here. Well, it's not great, but I can't really describe it as absolutely terrible. However, what I can describe as excellent is the condition of this wing. It really, really is in fantastic condition. And maybe you're wondering, why the heck is this guy worried about the condition of a wing? Well, let me show you my NA's wing and you'll see exactly why. So you'll see that they have painted something on here, literally brushed it on to either protect it or perhaps to bring it back to a good state, which hasn't worked. I mean, you'll see it looks really awful. I don't like it at all, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, and so I'm sure you'll be able to understand then my delight in having a wing that is in such good condition. Okay, let's get into the boot, or the trunk here, as you in America like to call it. And quickly to note, these were all gummed up, and so what I actually had to do in order to open this boot, because the key mechanism here, the locking mechanism, doesn't actually work. It accepts the key, it turns, but there is no actuation here, and so what I actually had to do is I had to remove all this stuff, climb into the front there, jam the electrical switch on, so this was actuating on a continuous basis, climb in. Then I had to come in and loosen these locking mechanisms here until they finally gave way while I was pushing up on the glass from inside, and it opened up, and then it was just a case of a little bit of cleaning and so on. Now that we're in, let's just take a look at this hatch. It still looks good at the back there, and all of this looks pretty good. There's a little bit of residual material here. I'm wondering if that's from the factory, or if there was something that was done aftermarket here. Okay, that's that. I'm really chuffed that this cover is here. Generally speaking, I've seen that a lot of cars still have the motors, but the covers are gone, so I'm quite pleased about that. Then let's look at our seal. Hatch seal, of course, this causes the ingress of the exhaust fumes looking pretty good, and so it will do the job. Oh yes, and then while I'm remembering, there is that gentleman on Facebook, and I forget his name while I'm remembering here, that does the hatch repairs and apparently does a really good job bringing the glass and the frame back together. He mentioned something that exacerbates the issue, and it is actually hinges. And more specifically, the lack of grease in hinges. And so I thought I'd mention it here. Make sure you go and get some lubrication into those hinges, because it seems to exacerbate the issue. Okay, let's return now to the boot. And what do I have? The first thing to note is that it's got really good carpets. When I was climbing in here, I thought, oh, these are pretty good, pretty nice. Certainly better than what I had in my NA. But at the moment you can't see anything because it's full of stuff, and the first thing that is here is this. And so I have looked for a part number. It is right down there, which tells me that this should have come with the car, which is good, but unfortunately this one is in not a good state. And so I'm wondering if there's any way to salvage this, or if it can be used perhaps even as a pattern for some kind of fabrication process. But if any of you have done anything like that, please let us all know in the comment section down below. That would be really helpful. Okay, then I've got my big red, which is an excellent jack. And then you'll see over here it says fragile, handle with care, glass. And that's because the car came with a replacement windscreen, because the windshield up front is in absolute terrible condition. And I'll show that to you in just a second, and the cause. But this particular windscreen doesn't seem to be for 944. I was poking around a little bit, and somewhere there was a note that said Cayenne, and I'm not sure if a Cayenne windscreen is compatible with a 944. If any of you know, please let me know, because it would be a real pity to have this and not be able to use it. But you know, I've not read or seen anything that would indicate that they are compatible. And then you'll see that there's a box here from Richard over at Partworks. He sent me a whole bunch of items to service the car and bring it up to usable condition. Of course, there will be other things we have to order as we go along, because we'll uncover something invariably, but we'll work that out as we go along. Okay, let's return our attention over to the bodywork. It continues down on this side as well. And then there's also some trim that isn't in such good shape here, so that may be needing removal. There is a product or two in the forums that have been spoken about to help remove this. If you wouldn't mind please reminding me about that in the comments section, I'd appreciate that. But if I do remove it, I may just be losing a little bit of identity, and so perhaps then that isn't what I'm going to be doing, but let's wait and see. Maybe there's some other kind of solution that still keeps that identity intact. And then door handles. This particular door handle, it's one of those upgraded, so-called upgraded VW units, but the problem with it is that it actually doesn't work. And the reason for that is because the trigger mechanism is too big, it's too bulky, and so when you activate the trigger here, it just pushes out. Now, I don't know why we aren't more definitive in our community about door handles. Anyway, I'm going to go on a rant here. I don't want to do that. So there will definitely be a video about these. Okay, and then there's this. Yeah, and they seem to have tried to fix it with epoxy. This is fairly common apparently, and the fix isn't actually that difficult, but it does involve taking this whole bit off here and then doing some work, but we'll get into that as well. Okay, let's turn our attention now over to the sunroof, and the theme of bad paint continues. Let's look at the seal here. Oh, it's looking rather crusty. And then here on the corner, some bubbling and paint that is lifted, and so that really means corrosion is taking place, which means we're going to have to lift that paint and do some work here. I'm sure it probably is occurring in other places. Speaking about lifting, let me show you something. Are you watching? Yep. The internals are gone, and so we're going to have to sort that as well. And then, speaking about internals, let's take a look inside and take a look at what we can see. And the first thing you'll notice is that she's relatively intact, but rather grimy. And one of the rules that I made for myself when I bought this car, because my NA, the interior was so shoddy, is that this one needed to be in relatively decent nick. There are a few bits and pieces that are missing here, but nothing too major. And as I mentioned, it is grimy, but it is significantly better than what I experienced there. I think I'd rather deal with some bodywork than interior stuff, although maybe this car will teach me otherwise. Okay, let's slide in here and take a look at what we can see. Yeah, there's some missing bits, which I think is pretty standard nowadays. And then, of course, no radio. Then this ashtray is definitely not original. A DME relay for 993. And then, yes, this cover, this armrest cover here, it is in the back in one of those storage compartments. I saw it there. Then actually returning to the ashtray, you can see it's the wrong material. Let's see what this reveals. And terrible. It's got some lip ice here, which is pretty gross, or melted. And then we've got a couple of small hex bolts. And then something was going wrong with the central locking, the door mechanism. And here's evidence of the fact. And then just so gross. I can't believe I put my fingers in here. Look inside there. There's a plaster, or I think in America you guys call it a band-aid. Oh, that is so gross. Okay, let's put that away. What do I do? This is all on my fingers, on my socks. Gross. Okay, I'll get into the mileage in just a second. Let's take a look here. Okay, some paperwork, some wiring. It's probably for the light. And then if we look here at the seats, unfortunately this particular one is a little bit cracked, but that's really the worst of it. Everything just needs a little bit of love and care. Okay, let's go to the mileage here and then look at the dash. And we're sitting at 82,369 miles. But I don't know if the odometer actually works, because of course we know that there are issues with that. So we'll have to test that at some point or another. In fact, let me just see if I push here and see if there's any indication of anything working, and there isn't. Okay, let's look at the dash, and I mean, the dash is in really good shape. Not even a hint of any kind of damage, and so we must protect that. All right, it's also a lefty, which I don't mind because my NA was a lefty as well. Of course, I live in South Africa where we drive on the left-hand side of the road, so technically I should be on the right-hand side, but that isn't a big issue for me. Okay, let's make our way further forward and see what else is going on in the car. So if anything up to now has caused you to raise an eyebrow, from this point on it's going to get really hairy. And we just have to start here by the windscreen, and you'll see both on this side and on that side. I have to tape down some of the bits and pieces also to ensure that nothing leaks into the car if it rains, because of the fact that the bonnet seems to have shifted back for some reason and impacted both there and there, which of course has caused a catastrophe across the windscreen. And really the only thing that I know that could cause an entire bonnet or hood to shift back is front end collision, and there's a hint of that. We'll get there in just a second. Then we look at all the body lines. They are seriously wonky all over the place. Coming now forward a little bit here, there is some indication of some kind of front end collision, some paint lifting, and the panel that isn't so good. So there's definitely evidence that something has happened. And if we take a step back, there's even more to fuel that fire. Because if I come here and I look at this wheel well, the wheel arch, and the way that this particular wheel sits in it, and then I go over that side and I look at that one and how flush it is and how it sits so nicely, and then I come back to this one and I see just how far outside of the arch it is sitting, I begin to worry, especially because it's the same tire and wheel combination. The thing is, I was able to inspect the car on a lift before I bought it, and I didn't see anything out of place. I saw some other things which I'll show you, but I didn't see anything here that was out of place. So it's unusual, but it goes back to the point of some kind of impact here, and so that's going to be an adventure. Hopefully it's a small thing. It might not be, but anyway. All right, let's get a little bit more evidence of front end collision, and we have to just simply look at this bumper here. Some more repair work and skills that I don't have just yet, but that's okay. That's part of the process. So if we're looking at the car from this perspective, there's quite a lot that needs to be done, but fortunately I'm a tinkerer, and so I enjoy doing stuff and enjoy learning along the way, which is why I'm grateful that you are along for the ride, because there's a lot that I'm going to be able to learn from you, I'm sure. Okay, let's get into the engine bay. So this is where things go from somewhat superficial to real, really quickly. And the reason I say that is because the previous owner described to me how he was working on this car with a mechanic friend of his, but I can't see how that is true. When I consider some of the bodge jobs in this engine bay, I don't think a mechanic worth his salt would be signing off on anything here. But anyway, that aside, let me take you now through the engine. I will start here at the front and let's work our way back. I'll describe what the issues are and what videos we'll be making. Okay, let's start at the front here, and let's start with the fans. And the fans continuously run. As soon as there's a little bit of power, you know, the ignition is on, they will run continuously, and so that needs to be addressed. Then if we consider the radiator, is it holding coolant? Yes, it is for the time being, but there's no pressure in the system, so I don't actually know. And if you come with me here, and I put my finger in here, what do we see? This is water at the moment. What do we see here? And it is oil in the water. And of course that points us to one of two major things. Either a head gasket issue, but generally they're pretty bulletproof in these engines, or a oil cooler issue. And in this instance, I know it's the oil cooler because if you take a look down there, you'll see a huge amount of milkshake everywhere. Okay, so now we know that that needs to be looked at. Let's take another step back and we consider our belts and our rollers and the water pump. Everything needs to be assessed and looked at, and of course the belts will be changed. Then taking another tiny shift in, you'll see these electrical connectors, and it's actually all over the place here. There's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done on them. In fact, I don't know how this car is running if you consider our sensors at the back and the state of the electrical connectors there. Taking another step in, and we find ourselves confronted with the biggest oil leak I have ever seen. Truly, I mean, it just pours out of this engine, and it's coming from what seems to be the bottom of the cam cover here. And if we look at this cam cover, it really is in an abysmal state. And just look how much gasket material or sealant that they are using to try and seal it up. And so what I'm actually hoping is that they just didn't want to go to the expense and effort of getting an original gasket, and that is why there is an oil leak there and it's not some kind of damage. Then along with that, we have to consider the seals in the spark plug tubes. We have to change the fuel lines because we know what happens there. Fortunately, it's an S2, and so it's a much easier job than in the NAs. Then I want to be looking at the cruise control. Coming back here, I want to be looking at the air conditioning because I know that inside the console's working, but there's an issue down here, and I absolutely need aircon. I live in South Africa. Then I must look at the braking system to make sure that that is working. And then, if I'm just moving back into the cabin again, two of the gauges aren't working. The oil pressure gauge and also the temperature gauge. And so for oil pressure, of course, it could be the gauge, it could be wiring, and then it could be the sender. In the case of the temperature gauge, it's underneath here because there's two sensors, but the one that I'm interested in is underneath the intake. Yes, and then there's one other massive job that I have forgotten to mention, and that is power steering. Unfortunately, this rack is leaking in a very awkward place, and so that's another massive job. And those are the known issues, and of course invariably there will be other issues that arise, and so these issues mean videos. And of course I hope that you join me along on this journey. Please subscribe if you haven't. Up next I'll be dealing with this oil leak, because I can't do anything until that oil leak is sorted out. I can't bring the engine up to temperature, I can't check pressures, I can't do a whole bunch of stuff until that's done. Okay, I'll see you in that video.